The Occoquan Radio Podcast is a private production and is not affiliated with the town of Occoquan. Opinions expressed on the podcast are solely those of its host and guests. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 12th, 2025 episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Ernie Porta, bringing you 10 to 15 minutes of irregular, unscheduled updates on things Occoquan and beyond. This episode will cover a few town updates, discuss the town's incorporation in 1874 in our history segment, explore a myth surrounding Virginia Townships in the Rumor Mill Shredder entry, and close with upcoming activities in town. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. I want to start our town updates this episode by congratulating Evite Massage, who recently opened in town and held a ribbon cutting. Evite is a boutique massage and wellness studio located at 300 Ellicott Street, Suite C, in town. I encourage everyone to check them out, and I want to personally thank them for locating in Occoquan. I also want to mention something I forgot earlier, and that is the annual renaming of our island just east of the Route 123 bridge. As you may recall, this is a tradition we started a few years ago of having a renaming contest each year for the island that has grown out of the old 19th century dike. The contest is held during the Spring Riverfest and Craft Show, and then the dedication is done during the Fall Arts and Crafts Show, with the old sign going to the individual whose name was selected that prior year. On the 28th of September, we renamed the island Paddler's Point, which was selected from numerous submissions. This one by residents Jen and Rodney Loges. The list of submitters, incidentally, is not known during the selection process. At its most recent meeting on October 7th, the Town Council accepted a couple of grants, including one to beautify the area around the brick building near the southeast corner of Mill and Washington Streets. We also renewed the town's non-exclusive franchise agreement with Comcast and referred to the Planning Commission a potential zoning text amendment that would require special use permits for shops selling tobacco, nicotine, vapes, cannabis, or related items. Finally, I want to congratulate the winners of our last trivia night of the season, which took place on October 10th in Rivermill Park. We had a tie with two traditionally strong teams, the Quizzards and recovering Quizaholics, achieving the same score. And in what is a bittersweet moment, I also want to especially thank the team Mount Crushmore. They are the OGs of our trivia night events, which have been going on now for more than 5 years. They were our very first winners and have won numerous times since. I used to say if you did not win while Mount Crushmore was here, then your win has an asterisk by it. Well, they're moving out of the area and will no longer be able to participate in our trivia nights, though they do plan to visit for events like the Arts and Crafts Show. They have been great supporters throughout the years, not only of trivia night, but of our Occoquan shops and restaurants as well. We will miss them, but wish them all the best. In our history segment this episode, we're going to examine the incorporation of the town of Occoquan in 1874. Now, some of you are familiar with the various dates associated with the town's founding. The town seal uses the date 1734, which is when the Virginia House of Burgesses authorized the establishment of a public tobacco inspection warehouse on the north bank of the Occoquan River, near where the town eventually emerged on the south side. Then, of course, we know that the Virginia General Assembly in 1804 approved a petition by Nathaniel Ellicott, James Campbell, and Luke Wheeler to charter the town of Occoquan on the south bank of the river. Fewer people are aware, however, that in 1874 the town incorporated under Virginia law. But if the town was already chartered in 1804, why did it need to incorporate some 70 years later? As you may recall from earlier episodes, when Ellicott, Campbell, and Wheeler petitioned the Virginia General Assembly in 1803, they included in the petition a recommendation that 5 men be appointed trustees of the town: James Keith, George Gilpin, Thomas T. Page, Edward Washington, and John Coffer. The Virginia General Assembly accepted the recommendation and appointed the 5 men trustees of the town of Occoquan when they approved the chartering of the town in 1804. These men were thus appointed by the state legislature, not elected, and in the event of the death, resignation, removal, or otherwise of any trustee, a majority of those remaining could appoint someone to fill the vacancy. This was not uncommon in Virginia. Under legislation dating from the colonial period, the legislature appointed trustees to govern towns, rather than have them elected by eligible residents. As the early 1800s progressed, however, the General Assembly of Virginia, presumably at the request of individual towns, began passing legislation on a town-by-town basis that required the election of town trustees rather than their appointment by the legislature. This did not apparently occur with the town of Occoquan, however, and by 1870 all the trustees of the town had either died, resigned, or been removed, with the result that there was a full vacancy in the town's leadership. Consequently, the Virginia General Assembly on June 13, 1870, approved, quote, an act appointing trustees for the town of Occoquan in the county of Prince William, end quote. Noting the original charter of 1804 and the names of the trustees appointed at that time, and noting that all trustees had now died, resigned, or been removed, the legislation said, quote, for the purposes of putting in operation the act aforesaid, be it enacted by the General Assembly that John S. Powell, John H. Hamill, Abner Lynn, and Albert A. Selectman be, and they are hereby appointed, trustees of the town of Occoquan in the county of Prince William, with all the rights, powers, and duties conferred on trustees of towns, either by the Act of January 5th, 1804, not inconsistent with the general laws of the state relating to the towns, or by Chapter 54 of the Code of 1860, or any act subsequent thereto, end quote. So the appointed trustee system remained in place in Occoquan. Not for much longer, however. In 1869, the Commonwealth of Virginia adopted a new constitution, known as the Underwood Constitution, after Judge John C. Underwood, who chaired the state's Constitutional Convention. At this time, not long after the end of the Civil War and during the period known as Reconstruction, Virginia was under Union military rule, and its prior constitution had been effectively suspended. In order to rejoin the Union, Virginia had to adopt a new constitution, ratify the 14th and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, and be readmitted by Congress. In 1867, Virginia began a constitutional convention, and with it being the first time that large numbers of black men were allowed to vote, 24 black men and 80 white men were elected delegates to the convention. The resulting constitution was overwhelmingly ratified in 1869 and went into effect in 1870. The Constitution and resulting changes to the Virginia State Code moved away from the ad hoc chartering of towns and encouraged a regular process. Among those changes, the resulting state code called for May elections of a mayor and council for all incorporated towns with less than 5,000 inhabitants. It was under these provisions in 1874 that the Virginia legislature passed an act incorporating the town of Occoquan on April 30th, 1874. Now the town's governance would no longer be the purview of trustees appointed by the legislature, but that of a 5-person town council elected annually, who could appoint, including from outside their ranks, a mayor, clerk, and sergeant from among town residents. Under the act passed by the legislature, the first council election was to take place a little more than a year later, on the first Tuesday in May, 1875. But in the meantime, in the Act of Incorporation, the legislature appointed John S. Powell, John H. Hamill, John Underwood, Joseph T. Janney, and Thomas L. Selectman as the council of the town of Occoquan, to serve until the first weekday of July, 1875, at which point the council elected in May of that year would take office. It appears that this initial council selected Thomas L. Selectman as the town's first mayor, for in a list of grand jurors in the Prince William County Clerk's loose papers, which are transcribed in the voluminous Ron Turner collection, is an entry from September 22, 1874, that includes, quote, Thomas L. Selectman, Mayor of Occoquan, end quote. What were the results of the first town council election in 1875? According to the Alexandria Gazette and Virginia Advertiser of May 7, 1875, quote, at a regular election for corporation officers held in the newly organized though ancient town of Occoquan on Wednesday last, Oliver Underwood was elected sergeant, and presumably to the council, and T.L. Selectman, John Hamill, Dr. John Powell, and J.T. Janney, councilman, who will select one of their own number, probably Mr. Selectman, for mayor, end quote. Some of you might find it interesting that the trustee system of government in Virginia did not completely die away after 1870. In fact, enough ambiguity about it remained that in 2003 the Virginia General Assembly saw the need to take action. Noting that in colonial and early Republic Virginia statutes provided for trustees for certain unincorporated areas commonly called towns, which were established for governmental purposes such as the oversight of ports and regulation of commerce, and that the codes of Virginia from 1819 to 1873 recognized the existence of boards of trustees, but references to boards of trustees in the codes of Virginia disappeared thereafter, and that this was generally replaced with elected councils for towns and elected supervisors for counties and unincorporated areas in counties, and finally that Article 7, Section 5 of the Constitution of Virginia at that time required that governing bodies of counties, cities, and towns be elected by the people. On March 19, 2003, the Virginia General Assembly passed a law transferring the property, duties, rights, and contractual obligations of the trustees of any unincorporated area commonly referred to as a town or township to the Board of Supervisors of the county in which the unincorporated area is located. Thus finally ended the colonial-era town trusteeship system in Virginia. I encourage everyone who is interested in learning more about Occoquan history to visit Occoquan's Millhouse Museum and consider joining the Occoquan Historical Society. You can find more information at www.occoquanhistoricalsociety.org. That's the intro sound for our Rumor Mill Shredder segment. This is where we pay homage to the fact that while for much of its history Occoquan was a prosperous mill town, the only mill in operation today is the rumor mill. Here we take on urban legends, myths, rumors, or other similar topics that need straightening out. As we often do, in this Rumor Mill Shredder segment, we're going to stay with something related to the history segment we just covered. Like me, some of you may come from other parts of the country where the system of government is noticeably different from that of Virginia. I was born and mostly raised in Pennsylvania, where we have small townships that actually have taxing power. It's a common myth that Virginia has never had such townships. In fact, that is not the case, though their lifespan in the state was quite short. The Underwood Constitution of 1869 that I mentioned earlier actually required that all counties be divided up into at least 3 townships, each of which would elect a supervisor, a township clerk, 1 assessor, 1 collector, 1 commissioner of roads, 1 overseer of the poor, 1 justice of the peace, and 1 constable. In the elections of May 25, 1871, the Occoquan Township elected William M. Lynn, supervisor, James L. Cole, township clerk, James R. Sullivan, assessor, Montrevel Cornwell, collector, John G. Taylor, commissioner of roads, Henry A. Keyes, overseer of the poor, A. F. Dunn, justice of the peace, and George T. Arrington, constable. Once again, we are indebted for this information to Ron Turner for his transcription of the Prince William County Clerk's loose papers. As I mentioned, though, Virginia's experiment with townships was very short-lived. In 1874, the Virginia Constitution was amended to replace townships with magisterial districts, and the offices were reduced to 1 supervisor, 3 justices of the peace, 1 constable, and 1 overseer of the poor. Now for upcoming events this week. Leaf and Petal has their Leaves and Literacy Book Club meeting from 6 to 8 on October 14th. On the 15th, Madigan's will be holding a Sip and Script Modern Calligraphy workshop beginning at 5:30 p.m. Laura Jones Fine Art Gallery has its oil painting class on October 16th beginning at 6 p.m. And on the 17th, 2B will be teaching the basics of polymer clay and walk you through the process of creating your own Mothman figurine, while on the 18th, the Loft Gallery will have a Meet the Artist reception at 1 featuring artist Sherry Hawkins. Then on October 19th at Madigan's Waterfront Restaurant, there will be a brunch at 11 with the Hocus Pocus Sanderson sisters, followed by an adult-themed Hocus Pocus event starting at 7 p.m. Last, I want to alert you to an event a few weeks out sponsored by the Occoquan Historical Society. It's a free slide-illustrated presentation entitled An Introduction to the History of Occoquan, held at the Piazza, the old Down Under, at 301 Mill Street. The event is free and will include hors d'oeuvres, and of course attendees can order whatever other drinks and food they may wish. The event begins at 6 p.m. For information on these and other events in Occoquan, go to www.visitoccoquanva.com/events. Again, that's www.visitoccoquanva.com/events. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. I'm your host, Ernie Porta. Thank you for listening.